Welcome back. The Bible is not primarily a book about wisdom. The Bible is primarily a book that helps us understand who God is, who we are, and how we are to have meaning and purpose in life in relationship to God. But as God is sharing those things with us, He also gives us a lot of wisdom that we can apply to our lives. I grabbed onto that idea of wisdom when I was just a young person, and it's been so helpful for me to look at what wisdom is and think about having skill in life. I'm eager to share with you these ideas in this episode of Home Improvement because I think if we can help our children understand what wisdom is, it will help them to be successful in their lives in the future. And of course, we as parents often need wisdom. And we know that wisdom comes from God, and so we can ask Him for it, as James tells us. So let's look at this theology of wisdom a little bit more and understand what God would have for our family. I want to take some time and talk to you about a very important parenting approach that can help you as you're just trying to get things done in family life to think bigger and to turn your family into this place where children are growing and learning and developing. And in order to do that, I want to talk about the concept of wisdom. In fact, I want to talk about a theology of wisdom because I think if we take this idea of wisdom and we apply it to our lives, we're going to ask different questions about life. Again, I think it's not just about getting clothes cleaned and dishes put away. I think we're going to talk about how we're doing those things, and we talk about the how instead of the what. It moves us into this area of wisdom. Let's take a common problem that we have. You tell a child to do something, and he does it, but he has a bad attitude. There are two things going on there. You feel, okay, he did the job, he got the task done, and you want that, and so you might let him go because he completed the task. But at the same time, you feel uncomfortable because he had a bad attitude while he was doing it. That illustrates the two areas that we want to talk about. On the one hand, we have the issue. The issue is getting the task done, but we're uncomfortable with the process, the way the task was done with an attitude. Wisdom is often learned in the process. This is very important because you start asking different questions about life when you start talking about the process. And we want our children to know that it's not just about the task, it's about the process, how you get the task done. This is going to launch us into a whole bunch of parenting principles that we can apply to our lives. But before I go there and talk more about wisdom and how we apply it, let's talk about what wisdom looks like in the Bible. There are two Hebrew words I want to draw attention to in particular, and they are found in Proverbs 1:2. It says, to know wisdom and instruction, to understand words of insight. I want to look at the word wisdom and the word insight. The word wisdom is the word hakam, which means skill. That's what it is. In fact, it's used many times in the Bible. When Solomon is building the temple, he wants to find some people who are skillful at working with stone, skillful at working with cloth to make the curtains. These are people who are skilled in life. These are skilled workers. But the word is also taken on a meaning to be skillful in life. This is the person who can maneuver through life and get through life situations in ways that avoid some of the conflict, or people who are just wise enough to come to solutions that don't take them down the wrong path. Wisdom is such a valuable tool in life that this whole book of Proverbs is dedicated to understanding wisdom. In fact, the book of Proverbs is written to children so that children will learn wisdom. If they can learn wisdom now, it will help them so much as they're making decisions, as they're growing in life, and wisdom is much about the how, not just the what. This is so important because children often think that the what is all that's important. That I did what you told me to do. And sometimes even the what they don't do, right? You know, we tell them to empty the trash, but they leave the trash can sitting on its side in the bathroom when they're done. It's not just about the what, it's about the how. You ask different questions. Did I do a complete job? Did I do the job to the manager's expectation or the parent's expectation in this case? When I'm obeying, am I doing the job with a good attitude? Am I doing it thoroughly? Those are the how questions that bring wisdom into the picture that our children need. That's one of the words is skill or wisdom. And children need more skill as they are working through life. They need skill in their interactions with brothers and sisters. They need skill when they're disappointed with something. They need skill when they don't like a decision you've made and how to appeal to that. All of that is wisdom. Children need more wisdom, and we can teach it to them as we move forward. The second word in that passage is the word insight, and that's the word banah. And it means to discern or to recognize future consequences of my present actions. Many children are foolish in the sense that they don't recognize how their current actions are going to affect their future. And so we want to help them grasp those ideas as much as we can. Some children, frankly, don't care whether this affects my future or not. But the one who's wise is going to ask different questions, and they're going to see that working hard now is going to help me to do better in school later. That eating healthy now is going to help me as I get older to be able to deal with my health issues. So there's this wisdom and insight that children need, and this theology of wisdom is something we need as parents, because sometimes in our interaction with children, we just focus on the what. And often we need to focus on the how. Sometimes we'll say to a child, as we talked about character in our last session, you need to be more patient. Well, that's the what. The how is how do you implement that into life? So the how question is going to be an important one. The how gives us the plan. The how promotes the hope inside of a child's heart. So we want to help our children grasp this in some practical ways. Let's get some ways that we can parent in ways that help our children to address some of their own issues when it comes to wisdom. Let's talk about whining and complaining. Because children sometimes come into the kitchen and they start whining and complaining because they're hungry. And I think that's a very important time to teach children that there are two kinds of people in the world. There are whiners and there are solvers. Whiners focus on the problem, solvers focus on the solution. So if you come into the kitchen and you say, I'm hungry, even if you don't use a whiny voice, you're focusing on the problem where you could focus on the solution. So I say to children, if you come into the kitchen, instead of saying, I'm hungry, which focuses on the problem, what could you say that focuses on the solution? And so a child might say, could I eat? Yeah, well, why don't you be a little more specific? Could I have a snack? Okay, those are good solutions. In other words, let's focus on the solution. Let's just not focus on the problem. So if a child comes in whining, you might say, whoop, that's complaining. You need to go out, focus on the solution before you come back in. And so the child comes back in now and can say, Mom, could I please have a snack? We're going to change the whole attitude, the way, the how of a child experiencing life, not just the what. Because sometimes children get focused so much on the what, they're just thinking about themselves, they're self-focused, and they just display that selfishness in their interactions. And sometimes parents see the selfishness of their children and they just give them what they want to stop the complaining and whining. I'm suggesting here that we can teach our children wisdom when sometimes we stop and say, there are two kinds of people in the world, solvers and there are complainers. I think we need to ask ourselves, even as parents, what kind of how do we use in the way we're working with our children? Just think about your tone and your facial expression. Two very important hows in parenting. Because you've come in with your facial expression and your tone set a particular way, that can determine the outcome of your child's response. But sometimes the tone and the expression that you have is more positive, more responsive, more receptive, and that can influence the response of your child as well. That's wisdom. The wisdom and the theology of wisdom can impact us on a parent level, on a child level. We want to grasp that. One of the ways that we can help children develop wisdom, I think, in the greatest way in their lives is when they bring problems to us. Because children bring problems to us all the time. It's as if we were a button, bring your problem to me. And so children come to us all the time with their problems. A problem with another child, a problem they can't find something, whatever it might be. And how we handle that can help children develop the wisdom they need to solve problems. I don't think most of our children know how to solve problems as well as they could, and if they would learn how to solve problems better, they maybe wouldn't experience so much conflict. They wouldn't experience so much emotional turmoil because they have problem-solving skills. So instead of solving a child's problem, maybe we want to help them solve it for themselves sometimes. One of the ways we can do that is by asking open-ended questions for a child who comes in and says, I can't find my whatever. I can't find my shoes. And we might say, well, okay, would you like some help with that? Yes, I want you to find my shoes. Well, I'm not going to find your shoes right away. What I'd like to do is help you find them on your own. I can't find them. I already looked. Well, let me tell you what some other kids, would you like me to tell you what some other children do when they can't find their shoes? Okay. Well, some children sit down and they ask the question, where'd I have them last? And so when you ask that question, maybe something will come to your mind. Why don't you go spend some time thinking about it? And sometimes children will say, oh yeah, they're in the backyard. And they remembered, and you can affirm them from solving the problem themselves. They've learned something about wisdom. Asking open-ended questions is a great way to help children solve problems for themselves. Children often bring problems to us by complaining and whining and so on. And sometimes the way we respond to children can make all the difference. It can help them to be able to develop the confidence that they can actually solve problems for themselves. I think sometimes parents do too much for children when they could solve problems for themselves, and then if we do too much for children, they don't develop the self-confidence necessary to move forward. We can help children be more wise sometimes by helping them solve problems for themselves. So we ask the question, well, what can you do about this situation? I'm having a problem with my friend. Oh, you wouldn't believe what he did to me, and da-da-da-da-da. And so we start saying, well, are there some things you could do to influence this? And so open-ended questions are one way that we can help children solve problems for themselves. And we may eventually go and help them solve it, but we're still using open-ended questions to help children think differently. Don't just think about the what. Think about bigger things here in order for you to come into the situation and be more effective to solve problems for yourself. I think that another way that we can help children to solve problems or to learn from life, because I think wisdom to a great extent is being able to receive correction, not only from parents, but to learn from life. And one of the ways children can learn from life is through natural consequences. Natural consequences are your friend. They happen in life. Your child leaves his shoes out in the rain. I mean, if you would have seen them out of the rain, you would have told him, bring him in out of the rain. But you didn't. So now his shoes are out in the rain and now he wants to wear them and he can't. That's a natural consequence. His shoes are wet, he wants to wear them, he left them out in the rain. Now, how you respond when a child experiences a natural consequence is very important. If we ally ourselves with the consequence, in essence, we can say, oh, well, if you would have done just what I told you to do and you put your shoes away, we wouldn't have this problem. I would suggest it's better for us and wiser for us to express empathy and transfer the responsibility to the child. After all, it's their problem. We might say something like, oh man, that's disappointing. You left your shoes outside. Notice the transferring responsibility language. You left your shoes out in the rain. Wow, that's disappointing. You left your shoes out in the rain. What do you think you can do about that now? So we're empathizing, but we're asking the open-ended questions so children can learn from life. Some children want to just pout and be upset. But sometimes we can help them learn how to solve the problem. Maybe we have time, we could throw them in the dryer for a bit. Maybe you can use the hair dryer on them and try to draw them out. Maybe you could wear a different pair of shoes. I don't know. It's your problem. You could solve it. Natural consequences help our children to take responsibility for themselves and learn from their own experiences. If we solve too many of our children's problems, we end up with children who are too dependent on parents to solve problems. So this is a lot of what we do when children are older teenager, or even launching adult children, is we help them see the consequences of their own actions and we won't bail them out of the experiences. Natural consequences are a great tool for children to learn, so they can solve problems for themselves. Another kind of consequences we use are logical consequences. Logical consequences are where we step in and we give a logical consequence that somehow ties into the natural consequence. You use logical consequences when the natural consequence would either be too painful or it takes too long. We don't allow a 2-year-old to run in the street and learn from natural consequences. That'd be too painful. So we may pull them back and use the logical consequence. You need to sit here by me for a bit, or the consequence just takes too long. You left your bike out in the rain. Well, what would eventually happen to the bike if it's left out in the rain too long. One, it could get stolen by someone if you leave it in your front yard, but that might take a long time, or maybe it would be too painful. Or maybe it would rust. But we don't want to wait that long. It would just take too long to learn the lesson. So sometimes we step in and we use a logical consequence. And the logical consequence says you can't ride your bike for a week or something because you left it out in the rain. So we're speeding up the consequence that you wouldn't be able to ride your bike if it rusted. Now we're going to speed it up, and we're not going to allow them to ride it now. Thus, what we're trying to do here in helping our children learn wisdom is to tie the consequence with the actual mistake that the child made. So the child's learning from life. That's the goal. Learn from life because it's so valuable to do so. Sometimes parents make the mistake of using natural consequences in the wrong place. Every once in a while, a parent will say, my son's doing poorly at school. I'm just going to let him fail. Now, letting a child fail at school only works if the child is internally motivated. If the child is getting a good grade in their class, and then they stay up late at night one night and they don't study for the test, and they get up the next day, they take the test, and they fail the test, the child who's internally motivated is going to say, I'm not doing that again. I'm going to study, and I'm going to go to bed at a decent time, and I'm going to learn from the natural consequence. But many children, they aren't internally motivated. They're failing at a number of classes, and they stay up late at night, and they are not going to learn. So parents can't say, oh, I'm just going to let them learn, because all they learn to do is be a failure at that point. That's when they need another consequence instead of natural consequences or logical consequence. They need a consequence we call more parental control. Parents don't like this one, because parents have to step in, and they have to do some work to help the child be successful. But sometimes that's what children need. Oh, you have an assignment, a project that's due tomorrow? Okay, we're going to work on it this evening, and we work well into the evening, late at night, to get the project done, because what we're teaching the child is this, that when you do work hard, you can get the job done. And it takes a lot of parental control, parental firmness to help the child make that progress, but we're helping the child grasp this belief that yes, they can get it done. A very important thing that our children need. We're teaching that through life experiences. This is what's building the wisdom inside of our children. So choosing which consequence, whether it's natural consequences or logical consequences or open-ended questions or more parental control, requires wisdom on the part of a parent. Part of what we're doing is helping our children grow and learn and move forward. When we talk about the issue versus the process, we're talking about the wisdom element. So a child who's badgering you, mom, and arguing with you, hey mom, you should be able to do this. Look, I need this for this, and on and on and on. That child is doing what we call crossing the line of rudeness. As an adult, we know there's a line. If you go into the store and you say to the store manager, you say, this coupon I want to use for this product, but it's expired. But sometimes you let us use expired coupons. And the manager says no. You get one more time to appeal, socially appropriate. You can say, well, you've done this in the past. Could I just ask one more time? Would you do this? And if the manager says no, then you say, okay, and you walk away. Children don't understand the line, and some children just badger. That's the process, the way they're treating us, and they've crossed the line. When you see a child that's crossed the line in arguing or badgering or whining or complaining, when they cross the line, you want to stop the process. Don't continue to argue with a child who's crossed the line, because when you do, you're essentially validating their poor response. Their lack of wisdom. You're validating their poor process. You're saying essentially, it's okay to argue with me after a certain point, and I'll keep arguing with you. What you want to say is, I'm not going to argue with you here. You've crossed the line. Children don't know where the line is, so we're going to help them see where that line is so that we can help them to see they've crossed the line. It's inappropriate for you to do what you're doing. You see, what we're trying to do is help children understand that there's a process and there's an issue. Don't get so focused on the issue that you're willing to risk a relationship and damage the relationship, which is the process. Let's help children see that there's a process of the way you follow instructions is just as important as the instruction itself. It's the way, that's the wisdom part that we're trying to impart to our children. When we accept Christ as our Lord and Savior and He comes into our lives, the gospel message comes in and it starts to change us. It changes us by giving wisdom for handling life. That's why we love following the Holy Spirit. That's why we love reading the Bible, because we know that contained within that process of growth, we're learning about wisdom and what it is. We want our children to experience those same things, and many times God uses the hands of parents to work with their children to help them develop the wisdom that they will need for life. And we're praying that God will build that wisdom inside of a child so they'll receive Jesus Christ and they'll embrace the wisdom that God wants them to experience in their lives as well.